52 seconds. That's exactly how long it took for a billionaire's empire to crumble. He smirked as he handed his mistress his wife's seat on the board of directors. But he didn't realize his wife had already signed a single piece of paper that would brutally strip him of everything. To the outside world, Nicholas and Catherine Caldwell were the undisputed royalty of Manhattan's commercial real estate and luxury development sector. Their company, Kensington Caldwell Enterprises, KCE, boasted a portfolio worth over $8 billion, with glittering skyscrapers in New York, London, and Dubai. Nicholas, the CEO, was the face of the operation, a charismatic, ruthlessly aggressive 48-year-old visionary whose face regularly graced the covers of Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. Catherine, on the other hand, was the silent architect. Born into the formidable Kensington family, a dynasty of old-money industrialists, she was the one who had written the $50 million seed check 15 years ago to save Nicholas's struggling startup from bankruptcy. Catherine didn't need the spotlight. She had the power. She held a 40% stake in KCE, sitting as the vice chairwoman of the board. She was poised, elegant, and possessed a quiet, terrifying intellect. Nicholas had always relied on her strategic genius, but over the years, reliance had mutated into a bitter, suffocating resentment. Nicholas didn't just want to be successful. He wanted to be a self-made god. He hated the whispers in the elite dining rooms of the Grill and Le Bernardin, the hushed rumors that Nicholas Caldwell was nothing more than a glorified employee of his wife's trust fund. Enter Alara Beaumont. At 31, Alara was KCE's newly appointed vice president of global public relations. She was strikingly beautiful, fiercely ambitious, and entirely devoid of a moral compass. Alara didn't just want a wealthy man. She wanted an empire, and she had identified Nicholas's fragile ego as the ultimate backdoor into the Caldwell kingdom. Their affair began as a predictable corporate cliché: late-night strategy sessions at the Mandarin Oriental, weekends in Aspen disguised as investor conferences. But Alara was a master manipulator. She didn't just flatter Nicholas's body. She stroked his megalomania. "You built this company with your own bare hands, Nicholas," Alara whispered one evening, tracing the rim of her crystal champagne flute in a private suite at the plaza. "Catherine just signed a check a decade ago. Why does she get veto power over your vision? It's humiliating. The board looks at her, not you." Those words acted like a slow-acting venom in Nicholas's mind. At the time, Nicholas was trying to push through a massive, highly leveraged acquisition of a European hotel chain, a deal that would cement his legacy. Catherine had blocked it, citing dangerous debt-to-equity ratios. Nicholas decided then and there Catherine had to go, not just from his bed, but from the company. Ousting a founder and major shareholder is practically impossible without a scandal, so Nicholas and Alara manufactured one. Nicholas colluded with his fiercely loyal CFO, David Henshaw, and a sleazy corporate fixer named Davis Croft. Together, they began a sophisticated gaslighting and smear campaign. It started subtly. Nicholas began planting blind items in Page 6 and the New York Post about Catherine's deteriorating mental health following the recent passing of her father. He isolated her from key executive emails, claiming he was lightening her load so she could grieve. During board meetings, whenever Catherine spoke, Nicholas would offer her a patronizing look of deep concern, gently interrupting her to explain things she already understood, painting her as confused and out of touch. Behind the scenes, Nicholas and his lawyers drafted a lethal separation agreement. Using a labyrinth of offshore shell companies, Nicholas had secretly bought up the debt of Catherine's younger brother, Thomas, who had a severe gambling addiction. Thomas owed nearly $20 million to unsavory creditors. Nicholas bought the paper. Armed with this ultimate leverage, Nicholas waited for Catherine in their sprawling Upper East Side penthouse on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. When Catherine walked in, shaking off her Burberry trench coat, Nicholas dropped a leather-bound folder onto the marble kitchen island. "What is this, Nicholas?" she asked, her voice calm, her piercing blue eyes scanning his tense posture. "It's a corporate restructuring and a marital separation," Nicholas said, coldly, straightening his tie. "You're stepping down from the board, Catherine. You're surrendering your Class A voting rights in exchange for non-voting preferred stock. You will retain your financial equity, but you will have zero say in KCE." Catherine didn't flinch. She opened the folder and read the top page. "And why would I ever sign this?" Nicholas smirked, leaning against the counter. "Because if you don't, I will call in Thomas's debt tomorrow morning. The creditors will seize his assets. The Kensington name will be dragged through federal bankruptcy court, and your brother will likely face wire fraud charges for the collateral he faked to get those loans. Furthermore, I have an affidavit from Dr. Aris, my private physician, stating you've been suffering from severe clinical paranoia and prescription pill dependency. The board is fully prepared to vote you out for medical incompetence." Catherine looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the man she had loved, the man she had built, now hollowed out by greed and the whispers of a PR girl. She noticed, not for the first time, the faint scent of Baccarat Rouge 540 lingering on his lapel, Elara's signature perfume. Catherine didn't cry. She didn't scream. She picked up a solid gold Mont Blanc pen from the counter, uncapped it, and signed her name on the dotted line. "You always were a fast learner, Nicholas," Catherine said quietly. "I hope you know exactly what you've just bought." She walked out of the penthouse, leaving Nicholas to revel in his victory. He immediately pulled out his phone and texted Elara. "It's done. The throne is ours." 3 weeks later, the annual winter board meeting of Kensington Caldwell Enterprises convened in the glass-walled boardroom on the 68th floor of the KCE Tower. The panoramic views of the Manhattan skyline were obscured by a thick, oppressive snowfall. The heavy mahogany table was surrounded by 12 of the most powerful figures in New York real estate. Chairman Arthur Pendleton, a gray-haired titan of industry, cleared his throat to bring the room to order. Nicholas sat at the head of the table, radiating triumph. In the back row, reserved for executive observers, sat Elara Beaumont. She was dressed in a tailored white Tom Ford suit, her legs crossed, a smug, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Pinned to her lapel was a vintage Cartier Panther brooch, a piece Nicholas had purchased for $250,000 using a disguised company expense account. "Before we begin the financial review," Nicholas announced, his voice booming with artificial solemnity, "I have a difficult but necessary announcement. Due to ongoing private health challenges, my wife, Catherine, has decided to step down from her role as vice chairwoman and surrender her voting seat on this board, effective immediately." A murmur of shock rippled through the older board members. Catherine had been the stabilizing force of the company for over a decade. In light of this, Nicholas continued smoothly, raising his hand to silence the whispers. "We must immediately fill her Class A director seat to maintain our quorum for the upcoming European acquisition vote. We need someone with a modern vision, someone who understands global optics and ruthless expansion." Nicholas turned his gaze to the back of the room. "I officially nominate Elara Beaumont to fill the vacant board seat." The room erupted. Arthur Pendleton slammed his hand on the table. "Nicholas, this is highly irregular. Ms. Beaumont is a VP of Public Relations. She has no fiduciary background, and it is a blatant conflict of interest considering the rumors regarding your personal relationship with her." Nicholas's eyes turned ice cold. He leaned forward, staring down the chairman. "The rumors are irrelevant to this company's bottom line, Arthur. What is relevant is that I control 51% of the voting bloc with Catherine's surrendered proxy. I am not asking for your permission. I am calling a vote." Nicholas had spent the last 3 weeks bullying, bribing, and intimidating the remaining swing votes on the board. He had promised lucrative kickbacks disguised as consulting fees to 3 directors and threatened to pull funding from another's pet charity project. One by one, the board members reluctantly raised their hands. "Motion passes," Arthur grumbled, his face pale with disgust. Nicholas turned to Alara and offered his hand. "Mrs. Beaumont, please take your seat." Alara stood slowly, savoring every eye in the room pinned upon her. Her heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floor. She walked past the furious veterans of the industry and took the high-backed leather chair that had belonged to Catherine Caldwell for 15 years. "Thank you, Nicholas," Alara purred, adjusting her Cartier brooch. "I look forward to steering this company into a new era. The old ways of doing things are officially dead." Nicholas beamed. He had done it. He had evicted his wife, installed his mistress, and seized total, undisputed control of an $8 billion empire. He felt invincible. Down on the ground floor, Catherine Caldwell stepped out of the private executive elevator. The lobby was bustling with employees, none of whom knew that the architect of their company had just been erased. Catherine walked out into the freezing wind of 6th Avenue. A sleek black Maybach was waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door, and she slid into the plush leather interior. Sitting in the passenger seat was a woman with sharp features, wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a dark trench coat. This was Fiona Gallagher, the most feared corporate litigator in the state of New York, and Catherine's personal attorney. "Did he do it?" Fiona asked, her voice devoid of emotion. "He did," Catherine replied, pulling off her leather gloves. "He pushed the resignation through, and he gave the seat to the Beaumont girl." Fiona opened a thick red manila folder resting on her lap. "He thinks he cornered you with your brother's debt." Nicholas has always suffered from a fatal lack of attention to detail, Catherine murmured, staring out the tinted window at the KCE tower stretching into the grey sky. "He was so desperate to push me out, so blinded by his own ego and his little PR project, that he forgot to check the foundational bedrock of the company." Catherine reached into her designer bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper, aged and slightly yellowed at the edges. "When I funded KCE 15 years ago, I didn't just buy shares," Catherine said softly, her eyes gleaming with a terrifying, calculating light. "I insisted on a specific addendum in the original corporate charter, Article 7, Section 4, the Genesis Clause." Fiona nodded, reviewing the document. "An irrevocable, non-dilutable founder's covenant, stating that if the original seed investor is ever forcibly removed, coerced into resignation, or if their voting shares are transferred to a non-family entity without unanimous shareholder consent, the seed investor retains the unilateral right to trigger an immediate recall of all company debt and terminate the CEO for cause," Catherine finished. "And the beauty of it," Fiona smiled, a predatory grin, "is that by officially placing his mistress in your seat, a clear non-family entity, and forcing your resignation under duress, Nicholas just violated the covenant on the public record." How long until the trap snaps? Catherine asked. The board just ratified the vote. The ink is dry. Fiona checked her diamond-encrusted watch. By Monday morning at 9 a.m., the banking covenants will freeze KCE's operational accounts. Nicholas won't just be fired. He will be legally exposed to billions in defaulted corporate debt. We are going to strip him to the bone. Catherine leaned back into the shadows of the Maybach, watching the snow fall over the city her money had built. Good. Let him enjoy the weekend, Catherine whispered. Let them both think they've won. Because on Monday, I am taking back my throne, and I am burning their little kingdom to the ground. At 8:45 a.m. on Monday, Nicholas Caldwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit. He checked his Patek Philippe Nautilus, a sleek platinum timepiece he had bought to commemorate his upcoming European acquisition. The snowstorm had passed, leaving Manhattan bathed in blinding, crisp winter sunlight. He felt invincible. The weekend with Alara at the Baccarat Hotel had been a 3-day victory lap of champagne and grand delusions. Today was the day he would officially sign the paperwork to acquire the European hotel chain, cementing Kensington Caldwell Enterprises as his singular legacy. At 8:52 a.m., the heavy oak door to his office didn't just open. It was shoved violently off its hinges. David Henshaw, the usually unflappable CFO, stumbled into the room. His face was the color of wet ash, his tie askew, and he was clutching a trembling iPad. "Nicholas," David gasped, bracing himself against the leather sofa. "We have a catastrophic breach." Nicholas frowned, turning away from the window. "What are you talking about, David? Did the European regulators flag the merger?" "No. It's not Europe," David stammered, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the air-conditioned chill of the office. "It's J. Morgan Chase, and Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley, all our primary lenders." Nicholas's stomach gave a subtle, warning lurch. "What about them? They've frozen our operational accounts." "All of them," David said, his voice cracking. "Every single corporate credit line is suspended. JP Morgan just issued a margin call on our commercial mortgage-backed securities. $3 billion, Nicholas. Due in 72 hours. That's impossible." Nicholas roared, slamming his fist onto his mahogany desk. "We are in perfect standing. We haven't missed a single interest payment in a decade. Get our contacts at JP Morgan on the phone right now. I want the head of commercial lending on line 1, or I'll sue them into oblivion." "I already tried," David whispered, looking at Nicholas with a mixture of terror and dawning realization. "They won't speak to me. Their general counsel sent over a single document citing a breach of our foundational corporate charter, a default trigger. Nicholas, what did you do on Friday?" Before Nicholas could formulate a response, the intercom on his desk buzzed. It was his executive assistant, her voice trembling. "Mr. Caldwell, the board of directors is demanding your immediate presence in the main conference room. And sir, Arthur Pendleton says you need to bring your legal counsel." A cold sweat broke out on the back of Nicholas's neck. He sprinted out of his office, David trailing miserably behind him. When Nicholas pushed open the glass doors of the boardroom, he stopped dead in his tracks. The 12 board members were already seated, but they weren't looking at him. At the head of the table, sitting in the chairman's seat, was Catherine. She wore a razor-sharp charcoal Armani pantsuit, looking utterly serene as she sipped black coffee from a porcelain cup. Standing directly behind her was Fiona Gallagher, flanked by 3 grim-faced senior partners from Cravath, Swain and Moore. Across the room, Alara Beaumont sat in her newly acquired board seat, clutching her phone looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a speeding freight train. "Catherine," Nicholas spat, his voice echoing in the sudden silence of the room. "What is the meaning of this? You resigned on Friday. You have no security clearance to be in this building." "Actually, Nicholas, she owns the building," Fiona Gallagher interrupted, her voice slicing through the room like a scalpel. She dropped a massive leather-bound binder onto the center of the mahogany table. "Or rather, as of 9 a.m. this morning, she is the sole senior secured creditor of Kensington Caldwell Enterprises." Arthur Pendleton, the board's elder statesman, looked at Nicholas with venomous disgust. "You arrogant fool, Nicholas. Did you really think you could oust the founder of this company without checking the Genesis clause?" "The what?" Nicholas demanded, his eyes darting frantically between Catherine and his CFO. Fiona opened the binder. Article 7, Section 4 of the KCE Foundational Charter, drafted 15 years ago. If the seed investor, Catherine, is coerced into resigning, or if her voting shares are transferred to a non-family entity without unanimous shareholder consent, a poison pill is activated. The seed investor immediately retains the unilateral right to recall all company debt. Nicholas's face drained of blood. He pointed a trembling finger at Catherine. "You signed the separation agreement. You surrendered your rights. I have the paperwork." "You have a piece of paper you extorted out of me," Catherine said calmly, setting her coffee cup down. "But here is the beautiful part, Nicholas. By forcing me to sign that document, and by subsequently handing my voting seat to your mistress over there." She gestured vaguely toward Elara, who flinched. "You officially and publicly violated the covenant. You pulled the trigger for me. It doesn't matter," Nicholas shouted, panic bleeding into his voice as he slammed his hands on the table. "You try to fire me, I will destroy your brother. I hold $20 million of Thomas's gambling debt. I will hand the wire fraud evidence to the federal prosecutor this afternoon." Catherine actually laughed. It was a cold, melodic sound that sent shivers down the spines of everyone in the room. "Nicholas, do you honestly believe I didn't know about my own brother's reckless behavior?" Catherine asked softly, leaning forward. "Thomas came to me in tears 6 months ago. I paid off his legitimate debts in full. But the predatory offshore lenders who were illegally extorting him, I tipped off the FBI about them back in August." Nicholas stopped breathing. "When you used shell companies to buy up that debt last month," Catherine continued, her eyes locking onto his with terrifying intensity, "you weren't buying leverage, Nicholas. You were buying illegal, fraudulent paper from targets of an active federal RICO investigation. By using company funds to acquire it, you committed wire fraud, money laundering, and corporate extortion." Fiona handed the entire paper trail over to the Southern District of New York an hour ago. The boardroom erupted into total chaos. Arthur Pendleton stood up, his face purple with rage. "You used